Hello again, everybody. This is Ecology Concept Sum Up 2. So now we will talk a little bit about how stuff is recycled in ecosystems. And you have, or you should at some point see this in your own sealed ecosystems. And you have also investigated this in the virtual lab with the snails and the Elodia plant. So, and this picture comes from BioNinja. So what this shows is simply that water cycles in ecosystems, for instance, right? And also that the organic matter produced by the producers are eaten by animals or broken down by decomposers, and again becomes inorganic nutrients in the soil that can be taken up by the roots and built into the biomass of the producers, right? So nutrients are recycled in ecosystems. And if we zoom in a bit more on two of the very important processes taking place in ecosystems, this picture shows this actually at a cellular level, right? So we have photosynthesis taking place inside the chloroplasts of the producers, the photosynthetic organisms. They use the energy that comes from sunlight to put together carbon dioxide molecules and produce glucose. A byproduct or waste product of this process is oxygen. Then in another organelle in cells, and actually mitochondria are found in both plant cells and animal cells, right? So this process of cellular respiration will take place in both producers and consumers. Both autotrophs and heterotrophs organisms would have this. And in the process of cellular respiration, the glucose will be broken down and oxygen is needed for that to take place. And waste products of cellular respiration is then water and carbon dioxide, and they can then again be taken up by the producers and used in photosynthesis, and as such oxygen and carbon dioxide, water and glucose sort of cycles between these two processes. And this was a little diagram that you were asked to draw. So again we see that the oxygen produced in photosynthesis can be used by animals, and the plants can provide food for animals, and animals will then breathe out CO2 that can be used in photosynthesis in plants, and water and inorganic nutrients will be taken up by the plants and incorporated into the organic molecules produced by this organism. And then you entered the virtual lab. And what you did in the virtual lab was that you measured how much carbon dioxide were in the different test tubes, and you used BTB, which is a pH indicator, to show this. And we can use BTB because carbon dioxide will react with the water in the test tube and form carbonic acid, which means that we can use the pH, because very low pH will mean that there is a lot of carbon dioxide, and a high pH would mean that there's very little carbon dioxide. And the results that you should have gotten are these, shown over here. And if I were to quickly run through what happens in the different test tubes, then we have, this is light conditions over here, test tube 1, 2, 3, and 4. And test tube 1 is of course just a control experiment, so there are no organisms in there, and we really just want to see that the indicator stays the same color, because we don't expect anything to happen, and if something did happen down here, then we couldn't really use this setup to test the effects of snails and Elodia, right? And then in test tube 2, since we only have consumers, we only have heterotroph snails and no photosynthesis, then we would expect the snails to produce carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide would turn the solution yellow because it becomes more acidic. And then down here, when there are no consumers, then CO2 will be taken up by the plant, and this would of course lower the concentration of carbon dioxide in the solution, and this would make the solution more blue. And if we have both snails and Elodia, then we have both photosynthesis and a lot of cellular respiration taking place. And you could perhaps predict that it should be, some people guessed yellow, but yeah, and that's fine as well, because it depends on how much the Elodia respires itself, because cellular respiration would also take place inside the plant. But in this version of it, it just stays green because carbon dioxide is produced in the respiration of the snail, but it's also used and taken up for photosynthesis in the plant, right? So it just stays green. And then down here in dark conditions, again, we have a control experiment. That's the first one. And then in the second test tube, we have sort of the same thing going on as up here, right? So the two snails would respire, use and produce carbon dioxide in that process, which would lower the pH and turn the solution yellow. And down here in test tube 3, since it's now dark, there is no photosynthesis taking place. And the plant would respire a little bit, but obviously in this case not enough to turn the solution yellow, but it would just stay green because no carbon dioxide is taken up by the plant. And then down here in test tube 4, we have both snails and Elodia, but no photosynthesis because it's dark. So again, what we see is that CO2 is produced in cellular respiration in both the snail and the Elodia. So there is a high concentration of carbon dioxide and a low pH. Yeah, so to sort of sum up this whole thing that we've just talked about, if there is no photosynthesis, then there would be no oxygen for respiration to take place. And if there's no photosynthesis, then there would be no food for the consumers. And if there are no consumers or detritivores or saprotroph to break down the organic matter, then the producers would eventually run out of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, but they would also run out of inorganic nutrients for synthesis of all the other organic molecules such as amino acids and DNA and chlorophyll and all the other pigments, right? So all these organisms, the different types of organisms, they depend on each other. So what I want you to do based on this is that I want you to correct and refine your answers to the snails and Elodia worksheet. And then based on both this screencast and the previous screencast with sum up of all the ecology concepts, I want you to answer question 1 and 2 and 3 in the worksheet called Ecosystems. And that's what you need to do and upload after today's module. I look forward to have a look at your work. Bye for now.